White House this hour as he debates when the economy should reopen. Big decision here now. Some states are working together to come up with plans to restart their own economies without the White House. One of them is California. We're waiting to see if the governor mentions it in his news conference now about to get underway there in Sacramento. Meanwhile, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo firing back after the president claimed he had, quote, total authority to decide when the economy opens up.
The president is clearly spoiling for a fight on this issue. This is no time for politics, and it is no time to fight. If he wants a fight, he's not going to get it from me. Period. This is going to take us working together. He does not have total authority.
Chief White House correspondent John Roberts leads this hour. Nice to see you, John, on the North Lawn. Let's begin there with you.
Bill, good to see you as well. It's a bit perplexing as to what this argument is all about. Certainly, the president has got authority over border and international travel restrictions, things that are under federal control. But it is the state governors who have been issuing all of these closure and stay-at-home orders. Still, the president insisting again today that the authority to fire the starter's pistol to reopen the American economy is his, and taking aim at governors in the Northeast and West who say they are getting together on a regional basis to make plans to reopen. The president tweeting, quote, "Tell the Democrat governors that Mutiny on the Bounty was one of my all-time favorite movies. A good old-fashioned mutiny every now and then is an exciting and invigorating thing to watch, especially when the mutineers need so much from the captain. Too easy." In his daily press conference today, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo acknowledging that he has gone hat in hand to President Trump for equipment and supplies, but that he will make the decision about what to do regarding New York. Listen here.
His proclamation is that he would be king. That's what a king is. A king has total authority. That statement cannot stand.
Cuomo said that he doesn't want to have a fight with the president, will not have a fight with the president, unless, of course, the president tries to get him to do something that he doesn't think is the right thing to do from a safety and health perspective, and then he would be open to a fight with it. Bill?
John, what needs to be in place before the economy gets moving again?
I mean, there's a whole lot with this soft target date of May 1st. There's a lot that has to happen between now and then. First of all, we've got to see the infection curve really start to flatten out, and then there need to be more measures in place for rigorous testing and contact tracing. Dr. Anthony Fauci telling the AP in an interview earlier today that so far those things that are necessary to reopen the economy are not in place. In an interview with Laura Ingraham to air tonight, though, the vice president said the coronavirus task force met this morning to make sure that there will be sufficient testing and contact tracing in place. And meeting with a number of people this afternoon who have recovered from the coronavirus, President Trump saying he is getting close to issuing new guidelines to begin the process to get America back to work. Listen to what the president said.
And I'm going to be making a decision pretty quickly. And it's being done in conjunction with governors. We have tremendous support from governors. And what I do is going to be done in conjunction with governors.
So the way that it looks as though this is going to work, and again, this is part of the interview that the vice president did with Laura Ingraham, is that the president and the White House will come out with new guidelines that they will disseminate to the states. Then it will be up to the states to decide how and when to implement those guidelines. The vice president also suggesting that areas that are least hard hit by the virus will probably be the first ones to open up. May take places like New York, Detroit, New Orleans a little bit longer to do that. The president also this afternoon, Bill, will be announcing who will be working with him on this new advisory board. I think is probably the best way to put it, to reopen America. He'll be consulting with a number of experts from a number of different sectors of medicine, the economy, business, political leaders as well, to determine where and when and how America can start to get back to work. We'll get that this afternoon.
He said that would involve governors. Waiting to hear on that.
He
if
did.
That's the case. Thank you, John Roberts from the North Lawn. Appreciate that, John. Nice to see you. Some health officials warning of a possible second wave of COVID-19 cases. My next guest was the first to say this 4 days ago.
So we're going to go down from now on in terms of number of mortality. Some states will have to peak a little bit later, but California, my state, New York are going to go down in terms of their numbers of mortality. So which is very positive as we move forward the worst is behind us as a country.
There it was. The worst is behind us. Dr. Ali Makdad, professor, University of Washington, the group that produces the model, which is often referred to by the White House. Sir, how are you? And good afternoon, and thank you for coming back here. Why'd you say that on Friday night? What do you see in the models there, doctor?
Still, the worst is behind us as a country, and as I said before, there many states are seeing a decline. Some states who delayed social distancing measure will see a peak later, and they will come down later. What we are seeing right now as a country, we're really making a progress, and people, Americans, have stayed at home and have helped us to really contain this pandemic.
A couple of things here, doctor, on the screen. Put up the chart, guys. This is the number of deaths that goes to April 10th. Which was Friday, the day you said that, and it's the highest graph it's the highest bar on the entire graph, and perhaps you're right about that. There's another projection in your model that says on June 27th, the United States will see its last death because of the coronavirus. How can you tell that now?
The model is still tracking very well the mortality in the U.S. and actually you're showing an average for some states that last deaths will be much earlier. So, for example, my state, we are a little bit ahead of everybody here. We peaked at April 5. We will see a reduction in mortality by the first week of May. So, certain states are ready to consider returning to business much faster than others, as long as we are able to make sure we have in place the testing and the capacity to trace all the cases and their contacts.
A few other things I saw. Peak hospital use has already hit, you believe, in New Jersey and in New York, Michigan, Illinois, and Louisiana. Well, we hope you're right about that.
We are seeing here in Washington, to give you my experience in our own university, we're seeing a decline in patient. Our capacity to do testing is increasing. Yesterday, we were talking to fishery industry, how we could help them to go back. We're talking to oil industry offshore at the University of Washington to make sure we do testing for their employee to go back to business. We're working with a big company here that they will test their employees to go back to work, we'll validate their test, and we're increasing all our capacity at the University of Washington. So good news coming from Seattle.
Okay. All right. So
everybody.
In the minute left here, you were to come out with a model that can show how different parts of the country can reopen. Is that ready now?
No, we will release it tomorrow at 12:30 p.m. Seattle time, Pacific time, and then yes, I'll be happy to come, Bill, and talk to you about it.
I would love that. You have an invitation to come back. What would you say to those who watch and listen and wonder, why should we believe you now, Doctor?
We have been right so far in our models here at the Institute for Health Metric and Evaluation, and we're doing these regular updates to make sure if there are changes in the country, we're capturing it because we believe we want to provide the best information. I want to tell the people, Bill, that who have stayed at home and listened to us in the population health area, we asked them to stay at home and they did it. Now it's my turn and our turn to listen to them and help them open the business in the country.
Doctor, come back tomorrow. The invitation is out there. We'll do a podcast on Thursday. We'll blast it out across the country over the weekend. And we have a longer extended conversation then, okay? Dr. Ali Makdad, thank you for being a friend of the program. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Here's from...
Joe helped me manage H1N1 and prevent the Ebola epidemic from becoming the type of pandemic we're seeing now. He helped me restore America's standing and leadership in the world on the other threats of our time, like nuclear proliferation and climate change. Joe has the character and the experience to guide us through one of our darkest times and heal us through a long recovery.
So former President Obama now officially making it. The endorsement for Vice President Joe Biden is stayed neutral during the primaries. I want to bring in Carl Rove to examine this. Carl, good afternoon to you in Austin, Texas. Hope you're doing well. Hope to see you in person again sometime soon, hopefully. A lot of folks might have been saying, what took you so long? But he made a point of saying, I'm staying out of this primary battle. Why do you think he took that approach during this, Carl?
Well, because it was clear right from the beginning that a lot of the people that surrounded President Obama's political advisors and so forth had real doubts about Joe Biden as a candidate, and both in the primaries and in the general election. And I thought that ambivalence was sort of reflected today in President Obama's endorsement. First of all, it took him 2 minutes into the 12-minute tape before he even brought up the issue of politics. And you're right, he would praise Joe Biden from a personal perspective, but I think he did two intentional things that could work or couldn't work, and two unintentional things that I think could hurt him. He specifically said Joe Biden was responsible for the economic recovery and bringing back the car companies. And, together, President Obama and Vice President Biden rescued the American economy and brought it back. That sets up a comparison between what happened under President Obama and what happened under President Trump before the coronavirus. And I think a lot of people might say, well, while I did okay in that very slow recovery under Obama and Biden, I did a heck of a lot better once Trump came into office, particularly blue collar types whose wages were rising slower than their supervisors under President Obama, but were rising much faster than the wages for their supervisors under President Trump.
So here's what Brad Parscale said from the Trump team. Now that Biden is the only candidate left in the field, Obama has no other choice but to support him. Even Bernie Sanders beat him to it. Obama was right in the first place. Biden's a bad candidate who embarrassed himself and his party. President Trump will destroy him. So they're going to say, it did not take a profound courage to pull this off today. I think it goes back to the question, what did you think of his hands-off approach during this, Carl?
Well, look, I think it was probably wise because he had to be the figure who unifies. There had to be somebody who was standing apart from this, who had stature, who could say, let's all come together. What's interesting is he said, let's come together today in this YouTube video by saying, let's surrender to the guy who lost. He put Joe Biden clearly on the left of the Democratic Party. He said he is, quote, the most progressive agenda. He is calling for, quote, real structural change. He said, now look, we shouldn't have run, I wouldn't have necessarily run on the same things if I were running today because, income inequality, it's terrible. And our education system sort of suggesting free college. We got to have, quote, bold new green initiatives. In a way, it was sort of dismissive of the more moderate approach that we saw under President Obama. And he painted Joe Biden as being on the most left-wing candidate the Democrats have ever nominated for president. Now, maybe that's true, but I'm not certain that if the election's going to be decided by people who are sitting there saying, I'm sort of in the middle, I sort of like what Donald Trump is doing, but I don't like how he handles himself, that's necessarily the most powerful message to get to him.
Okay, Carl, we have 7 months to debate that. I have about 30 seconds to get to the next point. Wall Street Journal came out with this, reopening the economy at last. Governors and Trump can share credit if they do this the right way. That's the headline from the editorial board. I heard Senator Rob Portman earlier today from Ohio saying, it's not the president's call, it's not a governor's call, it's an individual's call. American people by an individual decide whether or not they believe it's safe to be in school or the grocery store or church, and they will determine how the economy opens up or does not. What do you think is the right path on this, Carl?
Well, look, I think everybody's right. The president has a role to play in this. Governors have a role to play in this. Individuals can't. They've got a desire, but they can't act in violation of local laws or local ordinances or local orders to shelter in place. But they can have an influence on their leaders. Let's do this thoughtfully. Let's do it. Realize that the country is not all uniform. That there are different situations that apply in different places. Federalism works here. Let's approach this with an idea of tolerance and good cheer, and I think we can work our way through it. But let's realize everybody has a seat at this table: business, labor, local government, state government, federal government, and the individual all have a role to play in helping local leaders figure out what to do in this important moment.
Nice to see you, Carl. We'll talk again in a week, okay? Carl Rove in Austin. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
For weeks, we followed the story of Carl Goldman after he tested positive for COVID-19. Today, he and his wife, Jerry, shared their story at the White House. I'll talk to them live coming up this hour. And I'll talk to a researcher who helped develop a new test that just got the okay from the FDA. Could be a game changer in your town.
You can use saliva rather than the swab in the nose. It's more comfortable for the patient. Obviously, it can be repeated multiple times. And it's actually safer for the healthcare provider in terms of collection.
Greatly limited. So our employees just did a phenomenal job yesterday. As you pointed out, we had 50,000 customers without power at some point during the course of the day. And every one of those customers in New Jersey is now, we have other customers who are out now, but not from yesterday. And a similar number was true on Long Island, and about 1,000 customers are still out there. So our employees just did a phenomenal job. I sit here in the comfort of this environment, being able to report on the phenomenal work they did.
I'll tell you, it's one thing that always strikes me after storms. All kinds of companies help each other out, and you see them up in the cherry pickers, and thank you. Thank you for that, especially at a time, Ralph, when people are staying at home on orders, state orders to stay inside because of this pandemic, which makes me wonder about your commercial business and the revenues that are coming in. We're certainly at Fox not in the building. I know it looks like it, but we're at all different areas, and I'm wondering what kind of interruption you're seeing in payments and what you're doing about that.
Yeah, so we are seeing a shift. We don't have a lot of data just yet, but what we're basically seeing is an overall decline in the amount of energy being used, about 5% so far. And it's really tough sometimes to separate the effects of the pandemic from the effects of weather. It's been a pretty mild March and April so far, so there's a little bit of both at play. But the movement is away from the commercial customer, more towards the residential customer. From an economic point of view, candidly, while that may affect the number of kilowatt hours that we sell, it doesn't affect our profitability too much because the residential customer is a higher margin customer for us. So, but time will tell as this plays itself out. The sustained level of the economic impact will eventually creep into payment patterns and things of that nature.
So what do you do, Ralph, when you have a lot of small businesses who have zero revenue and they can't pay their bill? Are you giving any kind of buffer or leeway for them?
So we have committed to residential customers that we will not shut them off, and we will work with them in restoring their payment once they're back. At present, we're doing the same for small businesses, but we have not committed over the long term in the case of small businesses, other than to work with them to help them gain access to various government grant programs that are available to them. But we were, I believe, the first utility to suspend all shutoffs for non-payment of residential customers.
Well, I'm sure that's much appreciated, but yeah, at some point you've got a business to run. Yes, it's a utility. And speaking of which, you raised your dividend recently, and now the dividend yield is at about 3.7%.